Encyclical letter Laudato Si of Pope Francis, Chapter 5, Lines of Approach and Action, number 163. So far, I have attempted to take stock of our present situation, pointing to the cracks in the planet that we inhabit, as well as to the profoundly human causes of environmental degradation. Although the contemplation of this reality in itself has already shown the need for a change of direction and other courses of action, now we shall try to outline the major path of dialogue which can help us escape the spiral of self-destruction which currently engulfs us. 1. Dialogue on the environment in the international community. Beginning in the middle of the last century and overcoming many difficulties, there has been a growing conviction that our planet is a homeland and that humanity is one people living in a common home. An interdependent world not only makes us more conscious of the negative effects of certain lifestyles and models of production and consumption which affect us all. More importantly, it motivates us to ensure that solutions are proposed from a global perspective and not simply to defend the interests of a few countries. Interdependence obliges us to think of one world with a common plan. Yet, the same ingenuity which has brought about enormous technological progress has so far proved incapable of finding effective ways of dealing with grave environmental and social problems worldwide. A global consensus is essential for confronting the deeper problems which can be resolved by unilateral actions on the part of individual countries. Such a consensus could lead, for example, to planning a sustainable and diversified agriculture, developing renewable and less polluting forms of energy, encouraging a more efficient use of energy, promoting a better management of marine and forest resources, and ensuring universal access to drinking water. We know that technology based on the use of highly polluting fossil fuels, especially coal, but also oil, and to a lesser degree gas, needs to be progressively replaced without delay. Until greater progress is made in developing widely accessible sources of renewable energy, it is legitimate to choose the less harmful alternative or to find short-term solutions. But the international community has still not reached adequate agreements about the responsibility for paying the costs of this energy transition. In recent decades, environmental issues have given rise to considerable public debate and have elicited a variety of committed and generous civic responses. Politics and business have been slow to react in a way commensurate with the urgency of the challenges facing our world. Although the past industrial period may well be remembered as one of the most irresponsible in history, nonetheless, there is reason to hope that humanity at the dawn of the 21st century will be remembered for having generously shouldered its grave responsibilities. Worldwide, the ecological movement has made significant advances, thanks also to the efforts of many organizations of civil society. It is impossible here to mention them all, or to review the history of their contributions. But thanks to their efforts, environmental questions have increasingly found a place on public agendas and encouraged more far-sighted approaches. This, notwithstanding recent world summits on the environment, have not lived up to expectations because, due to lack of political will, they were unable to reach truly meaningful and effective global agreements on the environment. In 1992, Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro is worth mentioning. It proclaimed that human beings are at the center of concerns for sustainable development. Echoing the 1972 Stockholm Declaration, it enshrined international cooperation to care for the ecosystem of the entire Earth, the obligation of those who cause pollution to assume its costs, and the duty to assess the environmental impact of given projects and works. It set the goal of limiting greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere in an effort to reverse the trend of global warming. It also drew up an agenda with an action plan and a convention on biodiversity and stated principles regarding forests. Although the summit was a real step forward and prophetic for its time, its accords have been poorly implemented due to the lack of suitable mechanisms for oversight, periodic review, and penalties in cases of non-compliance. The principles which it proclaimed still await an efficient and flexible means of practical implementation. Among positive experiences in this regard, we might mention, for example, the Basel Convention on Hazardous Wastes with its system of reporting, standards and controls. There is also the binding Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, which includes on-site visits for verifying effective compliance. Thanks to the Vienna Convention for the Protection of the Ozone Layer and its implementation through the Montreal Protocol and amendments, the problem of the layers thinning seems to have entered a phase of resolution. As far as the protection of biodiversity and issues related to desertification are concerned, progress has been far less significant. With regard to climate change, the advances have been regrettably few. Reducing greenhouse gases requires honesty, courage, and responsibility, above all on the part of those countries which are more powerful and pollute the most. The Conference of the United Nations on Sustainable Development, Rio+20, Rio de Janeiro 2012, issued a wide-ranging but ineffectual outcome document. International negotiation can't make significant progress due to positions taken by countries which place their national interests above the global common good. Those who will have to suffer the consequences of what we are trying to hide will not forget this failure of conscience and responsibility. Even as this encyclical was being prepared, the debate was intensifying. We believers can't fail to ask God for a positive outcome to the present discussions so that the future generations will not have to suffer the effects of our ill-advised delays. Some strategies for lowering pollutant gas emissions call for the internationalization of environment costs, which would risk imposing on countries with fewer resources burdensome commitments to reducing emissions comparable to those of the more industrialized countries. Imposing such measures penalizes those countries most in need of development. A further injustice is perpetrated under the guise of protecting the environment. Here also, the poor end up paying the price. Furthermore, since the effects of climate change will be felt for a long time to come, even if stringent measures are taken now, some countries with scarce resources will require assistance in adapting to the effects already being produced, which affect their economies. In this context, there is a need for common and differentiated responsibilities. As the bishops of Bolivia have stated, the countries which have benefited from a high degree of industrialization at the cost of enormous emissions of greenhouse gases have a greater responsibility for providing a solution to the problem they have caused. The strategy of buying and selling carbon credits can lead to a new form of speculation, which would not help reduce the emission of polluting gases worldwide. This system seems to provide a quick and easy solution under the guise of a certain commitment to the environment, but in no way does it allow for the radical change which present circumstances require. Rather, it may simply become a ploy which permits maintaining the excessive consumption of some countries and sectors.